Hello Tutti and welcome to week 5 of the Intro to Shakespeare unit. Before we crack on with a new extract for week 5, I want to do a recap of week 4. So make sure that you have your notes in front of you from the first couple of extracts we studied for Macbeth last week. Remember that when I share examples with you for tasks like this, you don't need to have picked the exact same evidence that I have chosen, but it gives you a chance to have a look at the choices I made and the way I explained them in my own words. So your evidence can be different to mine. It would be great if you'd get in touch and share some of your alternatives with me if you haven't already. But for now, just have a look at the way I tackled the task and see if your notes are similar. In the first couple of weeks of this unit, I gave you 2 lists of 10 spellings to practice. These spellings are relevant to our study of drama, so I'd like you to return to these 20 this week. Test yourself before you have repracticed them and see what you can recall. For any of the spellings in which you make an error, I want you to note them down and make those into your list of spellings to practice this week. So you shouldn't need to practice all 20, just those that you are still unsure of. The second extract we looked at last week was from Act 1, Scene 5 of Macbeth, and it was the first time the audience gets to meet Lady Macbeth, so Macbeth's wife. He writes a letter to her about his encounter with the witches and about his new title, and the fact that the witches had accurately predicted that he would gain that new title. He also tells her about the prediction that is yet to come true, that he will become King of Scotland. So last week we read the section where Lady Macbeth received his letter and read that aloud on stage. This week we're going to have a chance to dive into her reflections and reactions to the news of her husband's new ambitions. Before we dive into our study of this week's extract, I want you to have a look at the image of Lady Macbeth I have included here. What does it teach you about her character? Look at the way she holds the crown over her head. Is it possible that she is as ambitious, or potentially more ambitious, than her husband, Macbeth? Take some notes now to make some predictions about how she might react to the news of Macbeth's potential success. This week's text is a little bit trickier than the ones we looked at previously, so I've included here a No Fear Shakespeare translation. I'll put the link for the website in the description box. Have a look through, get your head around the basic meaning before we dive into the original text this week. The final task this week is going to showcase your knowledge of the two plays we have studied and of the conventions of tragedy. I have included here a list of I can statements that I've pulled from the marking tag. These are the ones that I think are relevant to this task. And I've also included a checklist for success that I hope makes the I can statements that bit more clear to you. I am also going to show you a step-by-step process of my poster that you can refer back to as an example. So here is my poster at the very beginning. I've decided to focus on 4 of the conventions of tragedy or genre markers of tragedy. I've gone for greed because I think it will allow me to talk about ambition, fate or fortune, hamartia, which is another word for the character's fatal flaw, and then supernatural elements. For stage 2 of my poster, I looked back through the different extracts we have studied since week 1. So I have an example from the chorus when they delivered the prologue of Romeo and Juliet. I have some quotations from Romeo and Juliet respectively, and then in more recent weeks from Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. As you can see, I've made sure that my evidence is around the convention it relates to, and I've also left some space so that I will be able to write down my analysis of the word choice or techniques and how they link to the conventions of tragedy. For stage 3, I had to analyse each chosen piece of evidence. So I focused on one convention at a time and looked for specific examples of word choice or of other techniques that I thought contributed to the convention of tragedy. Once I picked the quote apart, for some of the conventions, I was able to really easily identify a separate theme. So for greed, I looked at ambition and power. For hamartia, I looked at the theme of love and how that really was the downfall of Juliet and of Romeo. For supernatural elements and for fatal fortune, the theme is really in the title, so I didn't add an extra icon for that. Have a look at the way I've organised my poster. Remember that you want to look at a minimum of 3 conventions. You don't need to pick 4, but a minimum of 3. Select your evidence and then spend some time explaining out that evidence and how it contributes to the tragedy. I want you to have a look at the marking tag for one final time and evaluate your performance on the entire unit that we have studied. So don't just think about your final piece of work, think about all of the in-depth analysis that you have conducted on all of the different extracts from week 1 to week 5, and try to be kind to yourself. You don't need to feel 100% confident in each of these skills, but hopefully you will see some progress and see that your confidence and your skill level has grown throughout the unit. That brings us to the end of week 5 and the end of this unit of work. As you transition into S3, I hope that you will remember what we have learned about Shakespeare and drama texts in this unit, and that your knowledge of tragedy, character, plot, and dramatic techniques will help with your continued study of literature.